Kieran from the PRP Management Committee. Thank you for your talk. Very informative. And my question is more in the line of an historical comparison, less about strategy, although it does touch upon that. Okay.
Can we have a bit of hush so we can hear what the question is, please?
Okay. Do you agree with the following? Ex-British Prime Minister Tony Blair's sister-in-law, Ms. Lauren Booth, having visited the Gaza Strip, declared Gaza the biggest concentration camp in the world today. And she beseeched the Israeli government, quote, "As a people, you live with the memory and under the shadow of the Nazi concentration camps. I can't believe that you are allowing the creation of such a camp yourselves. Do you agree?" And a British Labour MP and member of Labour Friends of Israel, Ms. Una King, has declared that Israel's treatment of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip is comparable to the Nazis' creation of the Warsaw Ghetto, was in the same nature as the infamous Polish ghetto. Ms. King goes on to say, "As a Jewish person, I am deeply ashamed of the actions of Israel. What makes the suffering of the Palestinians similar to the suffering of the Jewish people at the time of the Warsaw Ghetto is the arbitrary seizure of land, forced expropriations, torture, and a soulless bureaucracy exercising dehumanising methods of absolute control. And on top of that, the building of a wall, building a political ghetto, like the Warsaw Ghetto. People can't get in or out, they can't work, they're in a vice-like grip, a squeeze, an apartheid system. Do you agree? And is the current massacre at the Gaza border comparable or the equivalent to Israel as the Soweto uprising and massacre was to apartheid South Africa?
I mean, you know, the Holocaust wasn't a colonial venture like what we're seeing in the Middle East today. So that's one respect in which the comparison breaks down. Nor are the Israelis exterminating people in concentration camps. So there are any number of disanalogies between, what happened in the Second World War and what we're seeing today in the Middle East. However, it's an inescapable point to make that, not just in Israel, but globally, Islamophobia is the new anti-Semitism. It's hard to avoid making those comparisons. We should, though, I think, remember that Israel was established in 1948, but its current population, because of the provisions of Israeli law about the Aliyah, are in no sense fleeing. They're not fleeing the Holocaust. There are people pouring into Israel at the moment from places like the former Soviet Union, Russia, in search of things which can't, I think, be described as comparable to what Jews were fleeing Europe in the 1920s and 1930s over. So I'm hesitant to make that comparison too strictly, but I do think the way in which a state originally established as a sanctuary for people fleeing the worst kinds of oppression in Western Europe itself has flipped into this racist oppressor of the new Jews of the world, Arabs, Palestinians, obviously has to be part of any attempt to assess the meaning of what we're seeing in Israel-Palestine today.
Yeah, good day, Brian Concannon. First, I'd just like to say that Netanyahu is an insane, barbaric, war criminal monster.
Come to a question, won't you, Brian?
The question is, I believe the Balfour Declaration is the worst thing to happen to the Middle East, especially to the poor Palestinians. The second worst thing is Trump's US embassy move to Jerusalem. Shame. I'd just like to ask the question, do you think that Trump's embassy move and the Iranian pulling out of the Iranian nuclear deal is all part of the plan to have war with Iran and as a distraction for the atrocities on Palestinians?
Look, I'll break the rules from the chair. I mean, the answer is basically yes, because his technique, along with Australia, along with America, is to say that all these others are terrorists. So you get the use of the word terrorism is the cue. The Iranians foster every kind of terrorism. Israel is a bastion against terrorism, alongside all their other respectful allies. So yeah, it's a very deliberate, deceitful technique, and until large numbers of people, including the mainstream media, who play along with this too easily, until the word terrorism is demystified, because the question always needs to be asked, are you talking about state terrorists, the people who are murdering the Gazans at the moment, or are you talking about non-state terrorists? And there's a book which does an aggregate of who has the worst score of fatalities, and it's not the non-state terrorists. Okay.
I believe that both Palestinians and the Israelis have a right to a home and to defend themselves. And I also believe that Palestinians are victims of oppression, not just not just by abusive Israelis, because there are peace-loving, peacekeeping Israelis, but they are also oppressed by their very own Arab neighbors. I think I would ask any Palestinian here, if you are treated as first-class citizens in your neighboring Arab countries, because I know you're not. You are subject to oppression by your own Arab neighbors. And let's not forget that those who gain economically from this conflict are the military-industrial complex and the petrochemical industries. And we forget that they could be behind this very oppression of both the Israeli people entitled to defend themselves and to a home, and the Palestinians entitled to defend themselves and to a home. Thank you.
I want to refer to something which is important. In 1914, before Zionist movement succeeded to establish a state of Israeli occupation, Palestinians, in negotiations with Zionist movement in 1914, they asked the Jewish people to live in Palestine. But Zionist movement refused. They wanted to build a state inside the state. So Palestinians were not against Jewish people to live in Palestine. And I have evidence, many evidence about that. So don't think that Palestinians are against Jewish people to live in Palestine. But they wanted to build isolated settlements in 1914 inside Palestine. And they said, the Zionist movement, we will not integrate with Palestinians. We want to live alone. What does that mean? They didn't come to live in Palestine. They wanted to occupy Palestine. And for that, we should understand, we are not against Jewish immigration to live in Palestine. We are against the colonial project in Palestine.
Yeah, Mark, I work closely with Nick in the Refugee Action Coalition, but I'm also in Solidarity and I'm an admin on the Syria Solidarity Australia page. I got two things I wanted to ask. First, I'm very excited about the Eurovision. I think we should make this huge. In all seriousness, I think in Australia we're pushing on an open door, given Jessica Mauboy just came last, and she deserved to, given that she went to Tel Aviv on her way to Eurovision to perform. So I think we're pushing on an open door in Australia. How can we broaden that to our European, comrades to boycott Eurovision? The other thing, I guess, is, the potency of the key. you know, the whole symbol of the key. And I guess I wanted to raise that and seek comment, because now that has become a potent symbol for Syrian people as well, because of this new property law, which just gave a deadline of the 10th of May to the 10 million people who've been dispossessed from their homes in Syria to go back, which is an impossibility for most refugees. So now social media is filled with images of keys of Syrian refugees as well as Palestinian refugees of the key. And, you know, there's a question of the right of return now, you know, for them in what is probably one of the largest land grabs by the Assad regime. So seeking comment about that.
Assad is a brutal dictator responsible for the, you know, massacre of countless numbers of people and the destruction of his own country. I mean, any idea that Assad could be a hero has no room on the left, as far as I'm concerned. On Eurovision, the Israeli, you know, victor, you know, the ideological co-optation or the ideological use of Eurovision by Israel couldn't be clearer. I forget now the name of the victor, but she gave a concert in Tel Aviv, I believe, to celebrate the inauguration of the US embassy the other day. So she has, you know, clearly become identified as an organ of, you know, Israeli Hasbara or Israeli national promotion. And so I agree with you, Mark. I think, you know, the Eurovision Song Contest, which for reasons that aren't clear to me is big in Australia, you know, does offer a very significant, you know, very significant opportunity for the BDS movement. I mean, it's one in which something as measurable as the number of people who tune in can constitute a real mark of the extent to which there's support for Palestinian solidarity in this country. And I think we should, you know, not delude ourselves that the fact that the competition is being held in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or in Israel next year is a massive victory for Zionism. It's a big setback for the Palestinian cause, as is the fact that the bike race, the Giro d'Italia, you know, started in Israel this year, you know, in its extraterritorial state. So the BDS, there's a fight back against BDS, and we need to escalate in order to make sure that those kinds of propaganda victories, you know, are not in any way replicated.
Yeah, but I would like again to reply.
No, don't deal with the last question.
No, but I want to tell my friend here, PLO in 1987, in 1988, accepted two-state solutions, but Israel refused. Don't think, please. No, it's good. Don't think that Palestinians against Jewish people. You should think we believe about.
It's not saying that.
No. But he said the two states and yeah.
It's not saying that.
No. He said okay.
Can I speak? I wanted to say other things, but this last discussion made me un-Palestinian, of course. And I'm not going to ask a question because of a troublemaker, so I'm going to make a few comments. Look, there's a big gap between us as Westerners and people who come from the Arab world. I'm not going to say Middle East, I don't like that term. Because we're not in the middle of anything or east of something, okay? We are living human beings. We're called Arabs. There's a country next to us called Iran, and they're Iranians. Another one is called Afghanistan. But we are not just a location for others to dissect and partition us as they wish. The thing I want to tell you as supporters of the Palestinian cause, because to be a supporter of the Palestinian cause is to be progressive first and for all. Because Palestine is not about a location, it's about human values, principles, sacrifice. And I noticed that even our supporters have a convoluted idea of what's going on. I don't agree with you, for example, that Assad is a butcher. He's not a butcher. Okay, wait a minute. I'm just telling you about this gap between us. People who live there are different than people who read the New York Times and the New Yorker and the Sydney Morning Herald, and the friggin', what's his name, the guy with the Daily Telegraph, Murdoch, okay? Scum, thank you. Look, you guys, we are the ones who are getting beaten. You are only counting the blows. You don't feel what we feel. You don't see what we see. You keep telling us about nonviolent resistance. He talked about it. Do you know how many times the Palestinians, it's their daily life is nonviolent resistance. When they demolish a home and they start putting the stones together to build it again, that's why nonviolent resistance. When they uproot an olive tree that has been sitting there for 200-300 years, okay, and they plant it again, that's nonviolent resistance. They don't want us to have BDS. They don't want us to have rallies. They want us to shut up and die. Yes, we have a convoluted existence because our governments, Saudi Arabia, the people who live in the Gulf, they live in ivory towers. They're willing to send somebody on a shuttle to the moon rather than look around and see the poverty they create around them. We have the right to carry the gun. Castro did not win without the gun. Vietnam did not win without the gun. And the so-called American democracy did not win without the gun. You tell me if you wanted the IRA to stop fighting. You tell me as Irish people. Okay? So, we are not against the Jews, but we are not going to lie down on our bellies to prove that to you. There were, today in the paper, I don't know if anybody read it, 830,000 Jews lived in Baghdad, somebody wrote. Why are they shouting at us all the time? This Zionist living somewhere in North Sydney. I don't think there were 830,000 Jews, but I will accept it. Because the Jews to begin with are Arabs. They are Arabs. Muhammad went to a Jewish city to escape Mecca. The tribes were all over the place in the Arab world of Jewish tribes. These people who came from Eastern, and I'm sorry, Stuart.
That's okay.
All right? They came from Eastern and mid-Europe to come. Central Europe. Khazar, that's right. The Iranians up till today, they call the Caspian Sea the Sea of the Khazars. They were converted in the 9th and the 10th century to Judaism. And even writers from among them, say that they are very fanatic. What do we have to do with the Holocaust? What do we have to do with the Holocaust? And why do you guys submit to the bullshit of the Western media? Turnbull, he's blaming Hamas. I'm not a Hamas supporter. I'm a friggin' atheist. Okay? I'm a communist. Yes. But I support Hamas because it carries the gun and it supports the poor in the Arab world. All right? And it's not my first choice for a Palestinian organization. All right? But stop that bullshit. Think, put your feet in the shoes that we wear, not in the diabolical twisting of the Western thinking. There is no morality. But I'll tell you one last thing I'm going to close with. The United States, I don't call it America, by the way. I call it the United States.
Of Israel.
No, well, of Israel is fine, but it's the 52nd state. The United States of America is becoming untethered. What do I mean by that? No international law, no form of decency holds it down anymore. And so is Israel. And pretty soon you're going to see Western Europe following suit. There might be some differences. They don't like a multi-polar world. I don't like it either. I want it to be, I don't want any polarity. Democracy is not about going to vote. Democracy is about everybody having a free house, free education, free medical care,
Okay.
and free, that's it. Thank you, bye.
So that's... Look, I think we value that contribution, even if you weren't advertised as one of the speakers. Next.
Yeah, thanks very much to the panel. To me, the issue is this, that even if I didn't agree with everything the previous speaker said, but even if the bulk of it is true, the problem we face is how to develop or increase a strategy to defeat Israel and support the Palestinians. How do we build a solidarity movement? And just a point, I have a slight difference of opinion with Nick. I think the fact that Eurovision is going to be in Israel next year is a fantastic opportunity for the BDS movement. I would say it's absolutely number one goal for the movement now has got to start a boycott.
That's what he said.
Oh, well, you said it, okay, all right, okay. Well, I mean, it's a victory in the sense that it's there, but it's, on the other hand, it's a two-edged sword. It's a two-edged sword. But, I mean, the other side of things I wanted to make is just how do we build the BDS movement in Australia? Because remembering back, as many of us would, to the anti-apartheid movement in this country, the thing that we had, which is much more difficult with Israel, is that we had rugby union, and we had cricket. We had really key, everybody remembers, or of a certain age, will remember back to the anti-apartheid movement. We had some fantastic weapons. We stopped the rugby union tour and stopped the cricket tour. That just, wow, that caused a massive impact in the Australian psyche. It's, you know, it is difficult to find that key target, you know, that we can focus on. But anyway, I'll finish on that. But I really do think that we do have one now, and that starting now, Jessica Malboy, please just forget it. Don't go. We tried to campaign to get Jessica Malboy not to go for the third time, and nobody else to go, and then join an international movement. I think we've got 12 months to build a movement to actually destroy Eurovision. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Just I want to say about BDS, but we should think how to be more effective and working on the ground, and people to be easy for them to understand the rule to support BDS. It is important to update for example, the Israeli products in Australia, for example. It's not good just saying, all people, all activists know about Israeli products. I think it is good to have campaign against Israeli products, especially the products which came from Israeli settlements in West Bank. Also, if we want to build effective resistance, it is significant to coordinate together all the groups who support Palestine. It is important to coordinate, to arrange or to have priorities. For example, this week, nearly every day we have event for Palestine. That is good. But if we have, for example, coordination committee or steering committee for all activists or the groups, it would be good and effective to work together and to think what is the priorities and how we can have effective strategy to support Palestine. And we should think how to convince other people. It is not good to talk to each other every meeting. I will not go to convince Stuart or Kathy or Peters about the importance to support Palestine. It is important to think how to convince other people. And why we should support Palestine? It's not because we are, for example, against Jewish. Some people think in this way. All the time people think that we are against Jewish people. It is important to refute the Israeli claims and propaganda. It is important to have effective media. Okay, thanks.
Nick, you said Israel and Australia are the best of friends. Well, if that's the case, how come Mordecai Vanunu got 18 years jail for giving the Australian government a bit of information that friends should give to their friends free of charge? Now, another one.
Okay, as long as it's another one. Okay.
Did you want more? I can't see the Gazans and the Israelis ever getting on together while they're neighbours. So if I was living in Gaza, I would think very seriously about setting up a new home well and truly away from Israel. Somewhere like Latin America, there's places in Uruguay.
Okay.
My point was simply that Australian politicians make this ritual statement about Australia and Israel being best friends. I wasn't saying that's true. I don't know whether it's true. I don't even know what it means, except it's something that Australian politicians feel the need to endlessly intone, that we're the best of friends. Tony Abbott says it, Netanyahu says it back. It's a trope of political discourse about Australia and Israel. As for the inability of Palestinians and Israelis to live together in a single state in the Middle East, I just reject that entirely. If you look at the history of the Middle East, you see a history of hybrid, living among people of different faiths and different ethnicities and different ways of life. The idea that people in that part of the world are unable to live with each other is an extremely, I think, anti-humanistic, unrealistic, untrue idea. What needs to be eliminated are the mechanisms of, colonialism and oppression, which are the source of the problems in that part of the world. And if that happened, then there would be a prospect for a single democratic secular state in the Middle East, which is where all of this should be going.
I just want to add to this, Nick. In Nablus, we have Samaristan group. They are Jewish. And they believe that they are the chosen, actually, by God. These people live in Nablus since thousands of years. And they speak the Nabulsi accent. And they have two citizenships, the Palestinian and the Israeli one. They are still part of the Palestinian parliament. And we live together. And we live next to each other. We are neighbors. And it's for us acceptable to have Jewish and we have Christian in Palestine, and we always live together. But if the Gazan want to build a home, so it's our right to build our homes wherever we want. But unfortunately, we are living under the occupation who build the rules and the laws which we have to follow, but it's not acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, as long as it's quick and brief, because I'm trying to roll it up.
Shouldn't best friends tell other best friends when they do something wrong so that they can correct their behaviour?
Yeah. Well, look, it's a good question. I mean, when Netanyahu came here, Prime Minister Trump was all over him. Prime Minister Turnbull, sorry, it was the same thing, I suppose. Well, insisted several times that Israeli values and Australian values were the same. We're for some reason intoxicated with this deference to Israel via our deference to the United States. And I mean, I've said this before here, there's a quality of people called courage, and it's in such short supply in Canberra, with some brilliant exceptions such as Lee Rhiannon and Senator Rudd. And so that until it takes courage to tell your friend, or even to tell your kids, or for your kids to tell their parents, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you. There's a line in the sand here, you can't go over it. And that quality has completely disappeared. I mean, that contribution about America being untethered, meaning that the international law edifice that was built after the Second World War is now regarded as of no consequence. So where Australia's colluding, that's a major moral issue. Chuck the word moral back into the agenda. Anyway, I'm breaking all the rules of being in the chair. Next week we're talking about a totally different kind of gambling. We're talking about poker machines. The problem which Australia ignores, and then there's a great chunk of pessimism in a question at the end, will it ever end? Alison Keogh from the Alliance for Gambling Reform, and Justin Field, who is a Greens MP. Thank you for coming. Please please have conversations with other people who don't necessarily understand much about the slaughter that's going on in the name of bestiality in Gaza at the moment. But thank you for being here.